In the early years of the 20th century, the world was racing for power, for industries, armies, and territories. Europe was filled with great empires: Germany, Austria-Hungary, Britain, France, and Russia. Each nation wanted to become stronger than the other. They built alliances in the name of friendship, but deep down, there was suspicion, fear, and jealousy. Then came the spark that set the world on fire. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, was assassinated in the city of Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. That single gunshot changed history forever. It was the moment that turned political tension into a world war. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia for the attack and declared war. Russia, which supported Serbia, began to mobilize its army. Germany came to Austria's aid, while France and Britain sided with Russia. Within weeks, Europe was divided into two military camps: the Allied powers, Britain, France, and Russia, and the Central powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and later the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. What began as a small conflict quickly grew into a global war, spreading across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. By the end of 1914, the fighting on the Western Front between France and Germany had reached a deadly standstill. Soldiers on both sides dug deep trenches in the ground to protect themselves from bullets and explosions. This marked the beginning of trench warfare. Life in these trenches was harsh and miserable. The ground was wet and muddy, food was scarce, and diseases spread rapidly. Between the opposing trenches lay a deadly stretch of land known as No Man's Land, a place where few who entered ever came back alive. For years, soldiers fought fiercely, yet the front barely moved. World War I also became the first war to use modern technology on such a massive scale. Machine guns, heavy artillery, and barbed wire turned battlefields into killing grounds. In 1916, Britain introduced tanks for the first time. Poison gases like mustard gas were released, causing blindness, burns, and slow deaths. Airplanes flew over enemy lines, and German submarines, called U-boats, attacked ships at sea. It was a new kind of warfare, where science and invention were used not to build, but to destroy. By 1917, both sides were exhausted. Millions had died, and no one seemed close to victory. Then Germany made a critical mistake. It attacked American ships and sent a secret message, the Zimmermann telegram, urging Mexico to go to war against the United States. When this message was discovered, it enraged the American public. In April 1917, the United States entered the war on the side of the Allies. Fresh American troops, weapons, and supplies gave the Allies new hope. The balance of power began to shift. In 1918, the Central Powers began to collapse. Their people were starving, their soldiers were tired, and their leaders had lost control. Germany, the strongest of them all, was falling apart from within. On November 11, 1918, at exactly 11 a.m., an armistice, a ceasefire, was signed. The Great War was finally over. But the cost was unimaginable. More than 16 million people had been killed, and 20 million wounded. Entire cities were destroyed, families shattered, and a whole generation of young men was lost. The peace that followed was harsh. In 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. It punished Germany severely, taking away its lands, limiting its army, and forcing it to pay huge reparations to the victors. This humiliation and suffering planted the seeds of revenge and anger in Germany, which would later lead to an even greater conflict, the Second World War. World War I was called the Great War, but in truth it was the great tragedy of human history. It was not fought for peace or freedom, but for pride, power, and empire. Millions died, yet humanity learned the lesson only for a short time. Just 20 years later, another world war began, even more devastating than the first. Still, the courage and sacrifice of those who fought remind us that peace is the greatest victory of all.